Good day to World Bioeconomy Forum followers from all around the globe. Great to have you with us. Today we have an exclusive interview with Dr. Peter Holmgren, who works as a senior advisor on sustainability and climate change within the Swedish and European forest-based sector. Peter has a long international career in forestry and rural development. He served 14 years at the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, the FAO, including as Director of Climate Change. From 2012 to 2017, he was Director General at the Center for International Forestry Research. Peter, welcome to you. Great to have you with us.
Thank you. Pleased to be here.
I think we'll go straight into the questions, if that's okay. You have a long background in both forestry and climate change topics. What are your thoughts on the main current regulative tools on climate change mitigation?
Well, I think we should be careful not to dive too deep into the details of what is being discussed at the policy levels at national or European levels today, and instead look back at the time when the Climate Change Convention was founded in 1992. And it was established that there are two main tasks in climate change mitigation. One is to reduce our bad emissions from fossils and cement and other anthropogenic sources. And the other was to secure the sinks and storages of carbon, mainly in our natural systems. And since then, most policy developments have followed these two paths, but separately. And so what has happened is that the forestry mitigation issues have ended up in the second goal, to secure the sinks and storages. And it's not at all as visible in the first goal, reducing the emissions. And I think this is the main structural problem we're facing. This is repeated in the Paris Agreement, in the EU Green Deal, and in the Swedish climate goals. And we don't really get the regulations that embraces that the forest-based sector meets both of these goals.
Yeah. Thanks for that interesting answer. Thank you. We're moving on to the next one. Climate change mitigations are not only steered by regulative measures. What is your opinion on the voluntary carbon markets?
Well, the voluntary carbon markets essentially follows the two paths that I mentioned before. That is, they look at how can we stimulate a reduction of fossil emissions by allowing carbon credits to be sold from the other goal, that is the reinforcement of sinks and storages. And from there, part of these markets have evolved around selling carbon credits in forests. And it follows the general idea of net zero emissions that is pursued both politically and also by many corporations. There are risks that we are not helping the forest-based sector to deliver its own climate change contributions, because if we set off credits in the forest against fossil emissions elsewhere, we may be hindering the development of the forest-based sector. In addition, there is also, of course, the principal view that you don't doing anything for the climate, you're just shifting the emissions to another place.
Yeah. Again, a very interesting area for discussion here at the moment. So how do you see the forest's role in climate change mitigation?
We need to look at both of these tracks or goals at the same time, and we need to realize that an active and good forest management actually builds a long-term and stable carbon storage in the forests. That's what we've seen in the Nordic countries and in many other countries that have an active forest-based sector. At the same time, we also need to see the benefits we get from the products, from the wood that is delivered from these well-managed forests, because they continue to store some of the carbon for some time, and B, and importantly, help reduce the emissions from alternative materials and energy.
Yeah. So actually, bioproducts are really very important in the whole scheme of things.
Yeah, and we need to see the full range of benefits we get, and we need to see the circularity of the forest-based sector. Otherwise, we don't get the full picture, and we might develop suboptimal policies.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What about substitution of bioproducts for fossil fuel-based products? How is it related to climate change? And importantly, do you see the substitution as acknowledged or playing a recognized role in the sort of areas, in the sort of policy areas?
Yeah, so if we start with the acknowledged part, it's well acknowledged. If you read the IPCC report, for example, you can see that this is built into the scenarios, that they count on wood-based products to replace other materials with a higher climate impact. And you also see that bioenergy is expected to play a big role in phasing out fossil-based energy. So the acknowledged part is there. There is no doubt about that. However, is it recognized? That's where the issue comes in, for the reasons I mentioned before, because we have to straddle the two principal goals of climate change mitigation. And because policies have evolved along these paths a little bit in isolation, there are some issues about recognizing the role in policy measures, because straddling these two goals is not so easy. But so yes, it's acknowledged. No, it's not really recognized. And yet we can see that the potential role that we can attach to for wood-based products, and by that I include, of course, both solid wood products, I include paper-based products, and I include bioenergy. The combined role of these, if you have efficient value chains, if you have an integrated use of the components, if you have recycling, and if you have efficient end use of the products, is enormous.
Mm. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. The IPCC report was published just last week. What is your evaluation how bioeconomy and bioproducts are acknowledged by the IPCC in the climate change mitigation?
Mm. Well, the most recent report was on climate change adaptation, mainly. And to that, I would say that perhaps two things were not so obvious in the main messages from the IPCC report. One is that the best opportunity in forests to make sure that we adapt is that we manage the forest actively. It's processes whereby we can promote or select the tree species we want. We can manage the forests to be more resilient to the new weather patterns. And that's perhaps an underestimated part of the adaptation dimension in the IPCC report. The other is that there is not so much recognition. We should remember that IPCC is primarily a biophysical report. It doesn't go that deeply into economics and other sustainable development issues. There is not so much recognition that the driver for adaptation, if you like, in forest management is very much that there is an economic return on forest management. That's the incentive for keeping a good development of the forest that avoids the damages from, be it wind, fire, or insects, and thereby developing a stable forest condition, which also is the main reason why forests can mitigate climate change. It's a stable and increasing carbon storage, and it provides us with wood that can displace fossil emissions in other sectors. So again, IPCC very much acknowledges the role of the forest-based sector, but they are perhaps not highlighting some of the key dimensions of it.
Okay, so what do you think the problem is here? I mean, why can't we? Why is it? How does the forest-based industries get more recognition? What needs to be done?
I think we need to continue to build the complete story about the contributions that the forest-based sector makes. We must make sure that we are not confused with other things that impact the forest, such as deforestation, which is mainly caused by agriculture, and which leads to major emissions, no doubt about that. Or for that matter, when forests are removed for setting up infrastructure or mining or whatever. The forest-based sector should establish its own identity here, if you like, and prove that if you have a long-term commitment to forest management, it will be good for the climate, both in the forest and through the products that we derive from the wood. In addition to that, I think that we need to have a stronger focus on the value chain, because a lot of the discussion, a lot of the regulation, a lot of the policies is focused on the forest. It's important, but without an efficient and integrated value chain, we will not be able to reach the same level on climate change mitigation. If the forest stands alone, there is a limit to what we can do. If the forest is connected, well managed and connected to an efficient value chain, we can generate the climate benefits over and over again.
Yeah. So clearly there's work to be done for that more recognition there.
Yes, I would say so, and also on the integration, because I'm speaking from a perspective of the, shall we say, Nordic forest-based sector, where we have a long history of integrated production of solid wood and paper products, and also bioenergy. This is not the case in all locations, and I think there is a lot to gain in building the industry units and also the infrastructure for energy to reap more benefits for the climate.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you for that. So moving on, what is your recommendation for the upcoming COP27? How substitution should be dealt with in the United Nations climate change conferences? What's your opinion on that?
Well, it's the COP process is, of course, designed to follow a set of separate paths, and this has been the situation for a long time. They follow certain negotiation path with certain wheel tracks. To be able to acknowledge, for the forest-based sector, to be able to acknowledge that we contribute to several of these negotiation paths will be difficult, and it will require that somebody is prepared to look across these paths and see a bigger picture. I'm not very hopeful here. The forest negotiations are very much focused on the important issue of losing forests in the tropics. That's something we need to deal with. It hasn't really focused that much on the active forest management that we have in many other places, including in the tropics in many places. Perhaps a way forward would be to open this topic as a new topic, but I'm not sure this is the time to do it, or that it will be efficient. No,
sure. Peter, you've been fantastic. Well, thank you so much, and thank you to all our followers who are watching this video.